Hello and welcome to The Alternative Path with me, David Robson. This week, I'm really excited to introduce you to a lady who I first came across on LinkedIn. It's fair to say I noticed a post that Julie had put on LinkedIn that two things for me. It was inspirational about the journey she's been through, and complete kind of admiration for the fact that she'd shared that on an open platform. And I really like that. I think it's inspiring. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Julie Norman. Now, Julie is the Executive Primary Lead at Quantock Education Trust. She's also the Managing Director of Schoology Solutions, SOS. Now, Julie, you will be the best person to introduce yourself. So welcome to the show, and please just give us a bit of an introduction to who you are and where you've come from.
Hello. Yes, I put a post out on LinkedIn, and I seem to have gotten an awful lot of attention from that. So there's about 210,000 views on that. So I really wasn't expecting that. I put a post out there, basically summing up my background and why I do what I do. I do what I do with heart, so I don't do what I do for money. I never have. It all comes from the heart. It's simply that, when I moved to England when I was 12, and it was a huge awakening. It was a very different culture, a very, very different way of life. So by the time I was 14, I'd already sort of left school, really. The teachers had decided they didn't like me very much because I was trouble. I used to get in a lot of fights, and it's simply because I don't like bullies. I don't like people being humiliated. I don't like to watch it. And the only way I knew to deal with it was to sort of fight these other children. So I got excluded by 10 past 9 pretty much every day. So by the time I was 14, I gave up on that. I thought there's not really much point in going in every day. And my year leader sat me down, and that was the turning point, I think, when she said to me, you're breathing valuable oxygen. Someone useful could be breathing. And I thought to myself, wow, I know she didn't like me, but to wish me dead, that I was a bit stunned and taken aback by that. And I thought, I don't know why I would want to come back here, to be around someone who wishes I didn't breathe. So I just stopped going to school. My mother worked hard. My stepfather was a violent bully, and they would both go to work all day. So I just stayed home. They had no idea. They left before me in the morning and got home after I would get in from school. So they never noticed. And then to avoid my stepfather, when he got in from work, I would normally go and hang out with friends up in the field, up the road, drink a lot of cider. It was just a really unhealthy, what I see now as an adult, an incredibly unhealthy way of living as a teenager. I got in with all the wrong crowd. So I spent a good couple of years hanging out with the wrong people. Met Mr. Perfect, who was an alcoholic and drug addict, who wanted to just party all day, every day. So for me, I was living the dream. He was incredibly violent and aggressive, obviously because of, the drugs and the alcohol. But we went on to have 2 children. And by the time I was 27, I realized that this is not for me. He attacked my daughter. He pulled a chunk of hair out of her head. And basically I thought, you can attack me, but you're not attacking her. She's not going to live what I've lived. So I'd had 11 years of it, and it was time to go. Unfortunately, he was quite strict about where I could go and what I could do. So while he was away for the weekend, I packed the whole house up and the children, put a pin in a map. I'm not even joking about that. Literally put a pin in a map. It came up Bournemouth, and off we went. And I had never been to Bournemouth in my life. I didn't know what to expect. I just went down and I put a deposit on renting a house and moved in, and we started our brand new life. And that's what we did. That's where it all began. So that's where my whole life turned around, really. It was scary, but it was absolutely necessary. So.
Yeah, and even even you sort of talking about it is probably, well, I hope for anyone listening is that even that read your post first time is more inspirational. And I can only kind of imagine I had some rejection going through school, not to that level, by someone who's supposed to help guide you through not just education, but through like really important. The teachers aren't just about educating, are they? They're about kind of, as well as parents, don't get me wrong, but helping you kind of shape the way you're going to kind of live your life. And the level of rejection and effects that must have had, or even still have on you kind of long term, is just massive, isn't it? Like absolutely massive.
It's so damaging, and it does stay with you. Now, you know, at the moment, I have a coach. I've had a coach for years, actually, Lisa Carlin. She's an absolutely brilliant coach, and she is superb, because most of our coaching conversations, even now, are about confidence, are about me believing in myself. So it's a real barrier to me doing things in life, because I think, well, I probably wouldn't be very good at that. And it comes from the fact that people saying, you know, you won't amount to anything. You'll never be anything in your life. You know, you're a waste of space. It's those nasty comments from people you believe. That's the thing. You know, if you're an educator and you're saying that, children actually believe you. They take that as a formal assessment, you know, of their potential, really. And when someone says you'll never amount to anything, we think, well, they must know, because they're the educators, so they must be right. And I was obviously told that, but when I was 27 and I realized I was now a single parent and I couldn't get a job because I didn't have any GCSEs or anything, literally just left school with a reputation and nothing else. I said to my mum, like, well, what am I going to do? She was still in London, and I said, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to raise kids? And I didn't want to be on benefits and stuff. I just didn't want that. I wanted to be really independent for once in my life. And she said, you've got to go for the dream job. You know, if you could be anything in the world, what would it be? And I said, well, if I could be anything, I would be the teacher. I really wish I had a teacher who just could see the torment in my eyes and just pull me to one side and say, are you okay? Are you all right? You know, and even if I said, yeah, I'm fine, not believe me, don't believe me. You know, ask me every day until I'm strong enough to say, do you know what? No, I'm not okay. But I have to say, you know, all through my teenage years, I was waiting for someone to ask me, are you okay? I remember, you know, many years later in coaching, I was asked, why didn't you tell someone? And I thought, they never asked. It's really that simple. They didn't ask me. As an adult, I can sit here and say, well, you know, I tell children all the time, you must speak up, you must speak up. But, you know, they don't speak up. That's the problem. They will still wait for someone to ask them. So it's just such an important question. So I thought, well, that's what I need to be. I need to be that teacher. So if I just help one child, it will have been worth all the years of studying. But I knew I wasn't clever because my teachers told me I wasn't. And so my mum said, you know, you will always excel in the dream job. You will always achieve it if your heart's there. If it's the dream, you will do whatever you have to do to get there. And I said, yeah, but I'm not clever. And she said, but you don't know that. And so I spoke to my brother and I said, I'm not really smart enough to go to university and or to get a degree. I beg your pardon. I said, I'm not smart enough to get a degree. And he said, no, you're not. You've got to study for 3 years first. Then they decide if you can get the degree. So go do the 3 years studying and then ask yourself if you're smart enough for a degree. And I thought, that's a really good point, actually. I'm assuming I'm not very good. I have to go and study first and then judge whether I'm good enough to get that qualification. So it was one term at a time. Every term, I just thought I'll just do one term and then I'll leave because I'll fail anyway. And that would just be embarrassing. So, and every term I had the same conversation with myself, you know, I'll leave. And at the end of term, I'm like, you know what, it wasn't that bad. It was actually okay. That was quite an easy term. So I'll do one more and then I'll leave. And it went on for 4 years until I finally ended up with my GCSEs, my A-levels. I did GCSEs and A-levels in 1 year. And then I did my degree in 3 years. And then I did my PGCE in a year. And I was teaching and it was all okay. Actually, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that painful. And I could do it. And I immediately went to my first school I went to. I wanted to find out what's the school where all the unteachables reside at. Where do all the teachers not want to teach because the children are horrible? And I went to a school in Poole and they were really struggling with retaining teachers. They couldn't even keep supply staff for more than half a day. And the head said to me, if you get past lunchtime, you're doing great. you know, and I thought, oh my goodness. And I'm an NQT now. I've only just, you know,
not what you want to hear.
and I went into year 7 because, of course, in Poole and Bournemouth, they keep the year 7s in their primaries. So they go up at year 8. And so I had the year 7s the last year. And yeah, they pushed me about a bit. They chewed me up and spat me out for a little while. But you know what I kept doing is, instead of telling them off and instead of punishing them, I would just go and sit with them and say, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need my help? And I kept cuddling them, which they weren't used to. I would offer them hugs. You know, we would go out and go for walks, and it wasn't all trying to hammer them with English and maths. And they kind of saw I wasn't a threat. I wasn't going to tell them they're no good. And they changed, you know, and I became really close to them. And they were just adorable. To the outside world, they were little thugs, you know, who fought a lot. But what I saw was angry kids saying, please find a space for me to fit in. I don't fit anywhere. And actually, they were lovely, really lovely. And if a child came in that was new and was a bit cheeky, they'd also look around and go, don't talk to Miss that. And I
I think
but they were amazing, amazing children. And actually, they inspired me. They inspired me to keep on going and keep working with those children that have no place, really.
I think so, going into that environment as an NQT, you know, that's when I'm guessing your background really came into its own in terms of preparing you, didn't it, for that? But in the kind of work we do with alternative provision and pupil referral units and sort of after school tuition, you know, something you've probably just touched on there, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of how they kind of train teachers and get them ready to teach in schools. You know, when we get a position for a science teacher at an alternative provision, yes, teaching science is important, but if you cannot get engagement from 6 to 12 pupils who have got social, emotional, mental health, or ADHD or behavioural needs, it's almost irrelevant if you can teach science, because if you can't hold that classroom and get engagement, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you can't get that. Do you think they, like, in terms of preparing teachers for the different types of pupils out there, I mean, I'm guessing that's something that we can always improve on, but from kind of an NQT point of view in particular, if you haven't got that life experience, it must be really hard, mustn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within the Quantock Education Trust, I look after the NQTs, and I look after the trainee teachers as part of my contracted work with them. And the NQTs are not taught how to deal with children who perhaps have attachment disorder or are just generally disengaged because of the negative environment they've been in, and how they perceive themselves. You know, I mean, half the problem is how they perceive themselves, but that's come from somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So, it's undoing all of that, isn't it? So their perception of self is a lot better. And I don't feel NQTs are prepared. And then they struggle, and then they end up leaving the profession because they're ill-equipped, because they didn't live that life. So they don't quite understand why, when you're being nice to a teenager, why they push you away, and why they're nasty back to you when you're being nice. And I think, well, they're not used to people being nice to them. You know, I personally, I'm still quite uncomfortable. In fact, my conversation with my coach only last week was, I've had all these amazing comments from this LinkedIn post, which I was not expecting, I have to say. And I've had hundreds, I mean, literally hundreds of messages, and I've had private messages, a lot of private messages, and just saying, you know, I just want to reach out and say how amazing you are. And I said to her, I'm not amazing and I'm not inspirational. So why are they all saying this? I just gave my story. You know, I just wanted to introduce myself on LinkedIn to say, look, this is what I do and this is why I do it, you know, and why would people think that was inspirational? So I have to say I was a little baffled by all of that, because me trying to get through life, and let's face it, I made poor choices along the way. So how is that inspirational, to make poor choices? And she said, no, I don't think it's about how you got into the mess. I think it's how you got out of the mess that people
100%.
are in. But, you know, but we're all in survival. And I think, you know, if you've been through a difficult time, your survival behavior, whether you fight or flight or what you do or freeze, will determine, I think, your future. And I went into fight, really, where I thought, no, I'm not going to be labeled the problem. I'm now a single parent. And I thought, now I'm just another rejection in society because I'm a single parent. So I've just walked from one rejected person into another rejected person. And I thought, no, I'm not having this. I'm not having the world continually boxing me as a reject. And it's not fair. I wasn't born to be a reject. That's not right, So I think I went into sort of flight mode, really, and fight mode, and fought all those sort of. I mean, both the teachers would say, oh, children of single parents don't do quite so well. My daughter obviously had a long-term illness with ME, and my son is autistic. So the odds were completely against me.
Yeah.
Stacked up against me. But again, you have to somehow believe, no, my children are going to be amazing. They're going to be everything they want to be. And I don't care what it is, but they are going to be what they want to be. And that was all I ever said to them. You have to want to get up in the morning, and you have to feel so good about what you're doing, or don't do it. And I didn't care what they did, if they swept streets or what it didn't matter. They just have to want to get up in the morning and do what they're doing. It's almost not a job, What I do now is not a job. Just it's my passion,
Yeah, and I think COVID's probably made a lot of people switch into that mindset, because so many people have been so busy focusing on chasing a lifestyle, chasing a salary, where actually, if you're not happy doing what you're doing, what's the point? What is the point? Like life's too short, isn't it? And COVID's just shown us that anything can change at the blink of an eye. So be happy in doing what you're doing.
Yourself, those teachers who are saying those things to children, they've written them off. So why are they in the job? I mean, they're clearly not happy in the job. And what, as an adult, I can now look back and say they probably said that because they weren't happy. And the children are suffering that, because they are unhappy in the job. And so we have to look after the teachers as well. I went on to do my MPQH, and I'm just finishing off my MPQEL. So I look after head teachers now. And one of the jobs, I think, is I've got to look after the head so they're strong and they feel really supported and they're allowed to make mistakes, most importantly. And that's absolutely key. We keep telling children, if you want to learn, you have to make mistakes. Well, it goes the same way for staff as well. We're all human. And so the head teachers then take that to the teachers and say, it's okay to make mistakes, and I'm here to support you. And if you make a mistake, we'll put it right together. We'll work together and move forward and learn from it. And just as we would with the children, there has to be a whole mindset, whole ethos in the school. So then the teachers don't take their frustrations out on the children who aren't learning, because that's the problem. If you put too much pressure on teachers to get data, the pressure will inevitably be put down on the children to say, why aren't you getting this? I need you to get to ARE, hurry up, and the frustration is there. And the only person suffering through all of this is the child, and that's got to stop. We've got to change completely how we do things, so those frustrations are not at all shared with children. Children are not responsible for data. They're not responsible for how schools choose to run themselves. They're not responsible for government targets. They're not responsible for any of that. They're only ever responsible for being kind to their peers, turn up at school with a good attitude to learning. There are certain things they are responsible for, but your data is not one of them. So it's nothing to do with them, and teachers shouldn't feel that important to turn a child into something they're not. If they're not a high achiever, then we haven't found their talents. We haven't found what they are good at. Instead, you're just, you're pushing water uphill. So you have to get to know the child. So I did a course online just before Christmas, and it was on relationships leading to academic success. And I'm going to be putting that as an article in the Head Teacher Update. And it is about without Maslow, you can't have Bloom's. So the key message here is Maslow before Bloom's. If you want children to have a greater depth of understanding and learning through Bloom's, you have to get Maslow right. So those basic needs have got to be met first. Like you said, you can bring in the best science teacher in the world, But if Maslow isn't taken care of, I'm afraid those children aren't going to learn anyway. So and part of Maslow isn't just food and water. It has to be more than that. It has to be that we encourage those children to feel valued, to recognize their strengths, to be okay with the things they're not good at yet. And again, it's always a growth mindset. One day you might be, so what, and enjoy what you are good at, enjoy what you do, and use it to help others. So everyone has a place in society where they are a support role, but they're also learning. And I think until we do that, until we get that right, the children aren't going to make the progress we want them to make. They're not going to reach the heights of greater depth learning. It's not going to happen.
Completely agree. I was completely absorbed in your conversation there. What do you, I know we spoke about this briefly on the phone, but so many of the things you've just spoke about, so many leaders across all social media platforms talk about this daily. The threads on Twitter, the stuff on LinkedIn, it's massive. So what can we do to help bring that change? Well, obviously it kind of has to kind of come from the top to a point, but at the same time, what can we do? I know that's such an open question, but what can we do to bring around that change? And
it's really not, it's easier than you think. I think first of all, you have to go back to the why question. Why do we do what we do? And why do we do it the way we do it? That's most important. So I would say to all leaders out there, sit down and look at the most basic things you do and say, why do we do it that way? So in other words, if I was just opening a brand new school and I could do whatever I wanted, however I wanted, would that be what I would choose? And if the answer is no, bin it and go back with your SLT and go, well, how are we going to do it then? So for instance, I was executive head of 2 schools for 6 years. And I sat with the staff and I said, why do we teach subjects? Who told us to do that? Why is it important we teach them? Why do we keep naming it a subject and set it aside for an hour? Mass importance that, let's say it's science, and you say you have to have science for that hour or that 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon. Who said we have to do it that way? And we all kind of looked at each other and said, I don't know. And I said, well, what we wanted is that how we would design our school? If this was a brand new school, would we do that? And we all said no. We all believed wholeheartedly in more project-based learning. Because if a child has one bad science lesson and really struggles, they immediately decide, I'm no good at science. And then they come into science every week after that and say, I'm not good at science. This is going to go horribly wrong. I'm going to let myself down. I'm going to embarrass myself. So they come in on the defense. They're angry, they're frustrated, and they will do anything to get thrown out of the lesson, quite honestly. That's less humiliating than being thick at science. Yeah. So we have to remove every single barrier to a child learning. And if calling it science is a barrier, stop calling it science. And if it's a Thursday afternoon and they're tired and that's the barrier to them doing well in a more practical lesson, move it to Monday. So do everything you can to make that lesson and that learning really engaging and really fun. So the other thing I would suggest as well to leaders is, why are you writing all the policies when this school is for the community? So as a leader, as a head teacher, for instance, I am blessed really with just looking after a school for the community. So when I go, that school will carry on, that community will carry on. It's not my school. I just care for it, and if I can, I will do everything in my power to move it along, improve it somewhat, and then I'll move on. So it's really important that the community are part of policy making as well. So why aren't the children writing many of the policies? The marking policy, for instance, my children wrote the marking policy, and it was the best marking policy ever because it was exactly how they wanted it, which meant now they understood what marking was and why it was there. And it was designed in a way that they wanted it to be presented. So now the feedback was much more personal because it was about, they had decided how they were going to have that feedback. Now they said, I had different children from every year group, and some children in years 3 and 4 said, I don't want the teacher spending all day Sunday writing stuff in my books that I'm never going to read. And I just thought, well, that's thoughtful. Yeah, you're right. Why are we doing this? And it comes back to the why question. Why are you doing what you're doing? Ask the children, do they want that? Does it help them? Are they, let's engage the children a bit more. Let's use things like S planning or loops for learning, because then the children are helping to plan. The children and the teachers spend the first week or so planning their whole term together, deciding what they want to learn. And the teacher becomes the facilitator, not the teacher. So the teacher will say, well, what do you want to achieve? Oh, we want to put on a play, or we want to write an amazing story, we want to write a class book. Okay, so what do you need from me? And that's all the teacher should be saying. What do you need from me? And then the learning comes through questioning. So that's where your blooms comes into play. Some really good quality questioning, so that the children are constantly being asked questions instead of told to remember stuff. That's the lowest order of thinking, is to remember something for a test. Your SEN children really struggle with that. But with blooms, you take them into innovation. And that's where your SEN children show true strength. That's where their creativity comes into play. And they love when you take them into that zone. So now finally, you've got a real balance in the room. Everyone can access it. Everyone has a strength. No one's struggling. Everyone's engaged. Your behavior problems literally disappear, because everyone can access it now, and they're all valued. They're all important. Behavior issues completely disappeared from my two schools. We used to sit and touch wood and say, do you know, I haven't had a child sent to me for 3 months, for poor behavior or being cheeky or whatever. And then that ended up being a year, and then it was 2 years, and we were like, the children actually like coming to school. Attendance was 98%. But more and more children got to greater depth. More SEN children made incredible progress. But as well as all of that, if you want to just do some little things, let's say you don't want to do those big things as a leader, you don't want to go back to the why question, then just do the little things. So when a child comes in the classroom, does the adult turn around and smile and look happy to see them? When you're going to go, oh, hi, oh, morning, how are you? And how was your weekend? And listen to the answer. Like you care, and make that child want to walk in that room. They look forward to walking in that room because they're going to be greeted by someone who clearly loves them. I know with Ofsted, a couple of years ago, one of the Ofsted inspectors said to me, your children know the true meaning of love. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, they love the staff, and they know the staff love them, and they love each other. And she said, I have never seen that in a school before. And I literally just cried, because I thought they could achieve anything more if they believe that they are loved. Anything. So for me, the doors were open now for them achieving pretty much anything. And it was up to us to make it possible.
A couple of things you just touched on there. I just want to go back into and I completely agree with you. And I kind of, looking back, I wish that was in my school. So you spoke about something, that asking pupils to be involved in what they want to learn, basically. And exactly the first thing that came into my mind was, exactly before you even said it, was SEN pupils, but not even just the SEN pupils, those pupils that might not be SEN, but aren't the most academic, but are really good at creating. Like, completely agree. Straight away, you would probably notice a shift, that some of the more academic people would probably go a bit quieter, and then like you say, it starts to level out. And interestingly, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying about there's a mainstream secondary school, and they've obviously been doing a lot of online learning, and a teacher had mentioned that they'd really noticed a bit of a kind of more of a level playing field, because some of the pupils that were quite obviously had some reasonings for not maybe enjoying school as much started to engage a bit more, and they kind of it was kind of evening things out. And a completely kind of similar thing to what you were just saying about getting pupils involved, because like everyone has a gift, and we talk about it every time on every podcast. Everyone has a gift, and it's about life's about trying to find that gift. Some people find that gift at 4 years old. Some people find it at 35 years old.
One of the reasons is because they're given the opportunity to. So as a school, I think that you have to create loads of opportunities. You never know what gift a child has or what talent they have if they've never been given the opportunity. So for instance, all of our children learn musical instruments, and because we don't know who's musical until we give them instruments, and then we'll find out if they're musical. I wasn't SEN. I was completely disengaged. I was your CP child, your child protection child, really, but without social care involvement. That was all. I probably should have had social care involvement. I think I would have ended up in a foster home and then a PRU, no doubt. But if it was today, I think. But the thing is that, yes, everyone has a gift, and I'm not fluffy about that. I'm really very scientific about that, because like if you use blooms in teaching, for instance, you start off with, we've got to know some facts and we've got to analyze how useful those facts are. And that's where your lower achievers struggle. And you can't have a child not achieve in life because they don't have the best memory, or their processing's a bit slower than others. That's not fair. You can't disable them because of that. But then with blooms, you then go on into evaluating the best way to use that information and then get innovative and creative. Well, now your SEN are leading the way. Now your SEN and your disengaged children, they're the ones now who have creative, innovative minds. They're your leaders in the world, weirdly, because they think differently. They're not linear and they're not waiting for an instruction. They think outside the box. So now, the higher order work, you see your SEN and your disengaged absolutely flourish. And you actually see your high achievers struggle, because your high achievers aren't used to thinking that way. They're used to remembering and ordering in a very linear fashion. So we found our high achievers really struggled when we got to the innovative part of the learning. But the other children just absolutely flew. So yes, it was much more of a level playing field. So then we started to work with the children about recognizing a sense of self. So know what you're good at, know what you struggle at. And that includes the high achievers, all children. So the high achievers would say, well, I'm not that creative, I'm not very artistic, I don't really think outside the box. And then the low achievers are saying, I'm not very good at memory. So then they started to become ambassadors. So every child is an ambassador for something. So your SEN or your disengaged might say, well, I'm very innovative and I'm creative. So when we do some teamwork, I'm going to join a team of some high achievers who really struggle in that area, because I'm going to help them think quite differently. And the high achievers needed them. You're not being nice and cute to the SEN children. You're really not. You're actually supporting the high achievers now to think slightly differently. They need those children to work with them. And that's preparing them for life, that they should be surrounding themselves by different people with different strengths. So collectively, you can create something brilliant, that's life, right?
Yeah, and then the benefits to society of doing that as well would be great, because you'd start to move up, remove those kind of barriers, stereotypes, whatever it might be. It just seems, and again, it's like a lot of things, isn't it? When someone kind of talks about it with such clarity and passion, like you're doing, it seems obvious, but it's obviously, and I don't mean that in I don't mean that in any disrespect to anyone in education, but it seems like an obvious change, doesn't it? So yeah, there's so much talk on.
It's fear, David. It's just fear. When I talk to head teachers, they're like, "Oh, but Ofsted wouldn't like it." Well, Ofsted loved it, So I had 2 Ofsteds, because my first Ofsted, the inspector was quite rude to my children. Now I've always taught my children, don't be rude, and he was rude and snappy, so I asked him to leave. So he left, and he argued first, saying, "You can't throw me in. I'm here for Her Majesty's service." And I said, "Safeguarding trumps the Queen. Pack your bags." So he did go. But then I got another Ofsted, which I was glad for. And then they came back the following year. I said, "I don't want a Section 8. I want a full inspection. I want you to come and see everything that we're doing." We were massive on sport, art and music, and none of that came up in the Section 8. So I thought, no, if you really want to judge my schools, come back and do a full 2 days, which they did. And I was glad of that. That's when they were saying about, you know, the children know the meaning of love. They said the broad curriculum was feeding, you know, those areas of difficulty. So in other words, the confidence they were building in their sport and music, we would use that in the classroom for areas that they found difficult. Behavior problems were gone. You know, there was no exclusions. I didn't have any issues like that, you know. And so I think I was very much of, whatever you do for the children. Just keep asking yourself, why am I doing this? And how is this helping the child to be the best they can be? And if it's not, then why are you doing it? I mean, that's ultimately the question. You know, the Corntalk Education Trust came to me and said, you know, what you've done to those 2 schools, can you do to our primary schools? Can we have really confident, happy children who were being ready for 2045 for jobs that haven't been invented, using technology that hasn't been invented? Well, I can't teach them how to use technology that hasn't been invented, but I can teach them a sense of themselves. And I can create an environment where they can learn about who they are, the good and the bad, and be okay with that. Learn about other people and be not just tolerant, but embrace other people. I don't like the word tolerant. It's almost as though you're putting up with people. Do you know what I mean? So no, get to know them well enough so that you embrace them. Don't just tolerate people. And then a sense of the world, you know, where they fit into the world and how they're going to change it. It's their world in 20 years. How do they want it to look? And what will they do now to have an impact on that? And then they all just get busy and the behaviors are gone because everyone is valued, everyone's important, and everyone's got a job to do. You know, they're not in an institution, you're just remembering facts anymore, you know. So I went in there a year ago and it's amazing. The behavior issues have gone. They've just disappeared. Now, I promised that would happen. I'm not sure I was completely believed, but the behaviors are gone. Now, when you walk in any classroom in the schools, the children don't even notice you've walked in. They're so engrossed in what they're doing. The teachers are so happy. They're saying they love the new way of teaching, where the children are so involved. And they were like, they come to me and they go, you wouldn't believe the things the children said, even in reception. They come out with the most amazing statements. I'm like, I know, but we've never asked the right questions. These children are amazing. But all we ever do is ask them to recall stuff. And how can we ever know their potential if that's how we teach? So I just go into schools and help them really to ask the why question and make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah, I think I know you said when you spoke to your coach, you were struggling to understand why people saw it as inspirational, and I really hope that it to me, listening to you talk about it seems even more inspirational. I think that's just I know I can understand why you're saying you don't understand why it seems inspirational, but it really is. And I think the benefits of generally the benefits of more pupils being engaged, happy in education, it's not just school, is it? It's school, home, society, after school. You know, like you say, you're helping potentially future leaders like find themselves earlier. So what can that person then create earlier, rather than spending another 10, 15 years after school finding themselves? They've already done that, so they can think how much that can improve. Like, it sounds cheesy, but the world, not just a society, but the world. So I think it is inspirational, and I think I understand why you maybe don't see it like that, but I think it is. And I just think your journey into education is fantastic. The life experience that's given you is fantastic. The why is so clear, isn't it, to you, which is amazing. Something we haven't really spoke about yet is School Omega Solutions, SOS. Can you just talk to us a bit more about that and what that's about?
Yeah, well, what happened was I started being asked to, because of the changes I made in my 2 schools, I started being asked to go and do keynote speaking or conferences and training programs to help other schools to do the same. And there was only so many days in the week. You know, I had 2 schools. I was seconded to look after another 2. So now I had 4 schools and 2 preschools. And I was being asked to do all this training, and I thought I can't actually do all of this. This is impossible. And so I set up Schoology Solutions, which is what I started doing. Is the training programs I was going out doing, I just loaded on to a website, and I just packed them all in there. So all these inset day training, and videos to explain how to use the training stuff. So they didn't need me, they could just have the resources and crack on and do their own training. I wanted more and more schools to change what they're doing, so that it's much more focused on the customer and not on the data. And so I thought, I'll just put them all online, and I'll do videos. I'll even record my voice over the slides so they can use me if they want, but I don't have to be there. And so that's where it all started. And then I realized a lot of head teachers can't look after their teachers because they're so bogged down with paperwork. They spend most of the time in the office, and I thought we have to change that too. They've become admin, and actually their key role is to make sure that their teachers, every barrier is removed for their teachers as well, so that they are ultimately focused only on the customer. Nothing else should get in a teacher's way. And so as leaders, we should be focusing on that. And if we're stuck in the office with admin, I'm sorry, we're not doing it. So I created like an audit tool, which is like 220 questions. And if the head can just fill in those questions and rag rate themselves, green, amber, red, and then pop in just a short statement as to why they think they're green or why they think they're red, that now becomes your school development plan or school improvement plan. It becomes your SEF straight off because you just print it as a report. And so it's a reporting tool. It'll do all your reports for you. It'll do all your committee reports, your full governor's report, your SEF. It will do reports for your SEP if you have one who comes in, or SIP, it depends what you call them. So it does all your paperwork for you. So get out of the office and go into the classrooms and just keep looking for those barriers. What's stopping your teacher from being absolutely focused on those children and nothing else? Because if they're not doing it, they're not going to have that full and rich relationship with the child. And so we must be focusing on that, because they have to have a relationship with the child for the child to succeed. So that I put that on there as well. I spoke to an IT company and said, look, how can I give all this to schools so that they can change what they're doing, and they don't need me to come in and lecture them or do it for them. And they said, we looked at a price for a subscription, and I said, I'm not worried about being profitable. It's not about being profitable. I don't do anything I do for money. I said, I would much rather every school in the country just had this. But because it's IT based, that it has to come with a subscription, because I have to pay the IT team to look after schools. So if a school subscribes, the IT team will troubleshoot any issues that they have, make personal changes to it's called the audit and reporting tool. So you might make it really bespoke, which I have with the schools I'm working with. We have principles of excellence where we stand by certain principles, and that is that the child is the center of everything. And everything we do is for the child, and so theirs is slightly more bespoke. It's quite different in that sense. So it does mean you can really personalize it and have all your reports written for you, and get the head out of the office and seeing parents and working with teachers. So that's how it grew. It came from that, just trying to help as many schools as possible, really. I said to some local authorities, I'd happily sell them a license, and then they can just get all their requires improvement schools signed up. They've got all their training, they've got their audit tool, they know exactly where their strengths are. But with the multi-academy trust I'm working with, where they've all got the audit, I can marry up the reds and greens for school-to-school support. So we're not calling in outside agencies constantly and spending £600 a day. Instead, that actually it's about finding inner strengths. So which teachers are really good in which areas, which schools are really good in which areas, and how do we help each other? Just as we expect the children to do. It's about the ethos, and the ethos works for the children and it works for all the staff. So we all value everybody. Everyone is valued, everyone has a strength, and we use it to grow together. So I found my tribe with the quack, gotta say. We call it the quack because they truly believe everything that we do has to be centered around having a positive impact on the child, and I love that.
having that especially over the last 8 or 9 months, that a head teacher who's followed that program and able to not be in an office as much. I know there's stuff that head teachers will have been dealing with that are very not normal things to be dealing with, but if ever there's been a time to need a leader to lead from the front and to kind of offer support and staff well-being, like it has just been kind of shown, hasn't it? So
I mean, I found with the audit tool, I gave a login to my governors, and it was pretty much, if you want to know anything about the school, go in and just draw down a report on anything you want. You might draw down a report on just behaviour or just attainment, and that's fine. Just say you want a report on attainment. It will do it for you. It does everything for you. So I no longer have to sit and regurgitate the same information in 10 different ways and 10 different reports. And for me, that was so important, because I created that because I had 4 schools to look after. And 1, I needed to know my schools inside and out. 2, I had no intention of sitting in an office regurgitating reports to, 4 sets of governors. And 3, I wanted to know where the schools could help each other, and know each other's strengths and value each other's strengths, but also be really honest about where they want help to improve. And it meant I wasn't stuck in the office either. I could be amongst the staff and be there and support them, and again, constantly looking for those barriers. Anything stopping the teachers from being great and stopping the children from being great, I had to remove, somehow. So
it's great. I think it's great. I think what you've done, what you're doing is fantastic. I'm just massively behind. I'm like a massive advocate for this type of stuff, because I see it so much that there's so many pupils that fall out of education because of whatever the reason. There's obviously an abundance of reasons at times, but I just think working collaboratively as well is something that we should all embrace. Like you said at the beginning, everyone, you're always learning, aren't you? And anyone who thinks they can't learn is quite dangerous, because you never stop learning, and you learn from your mistakes. And there's a head teacher I spoke to the other day who was quite open and said the amount of times he's had to hold his hands up to his staff recently and said, I got that one wrong, this is where we can improve. Like nobody should be afraid of trying something for the fear of failure, because
I totally agree. I'm not one head. I won't name the head, but I met a head once and had a tour of the school, and this head was absolutely convinced she had everything nailed, because her children do really well in SATs, and apparently that's all that matters. So because they get such high scores in SATs, clearly this school is running immaculately and perfectly. I spent a couple of hours going around the school. I left. I should have stayed all day. I gave my excuses and left. And I sat in the car and I cried. And I was with my deputy, and we both cried, actually, because it was everything we didn't believe in. There were children crying in the classroom because they couldn't get the maths. And yet they're being hollered at, by the teacher. Why are you crying? You should know this. And I just thought that's everything I'm fighting against. So I'm not fighting against good SAT results. It's how we get to good SAT results I'm fighting against. Let's get there in a very different way. Let it be driven by the children and not by fear. Because what you saw in those teachers' faces was fear that these children weren't getting this maths. And that was a real source of frustration for them, because the head was sort of like, we get top marks in SATs. And I thought, what enormous pressures on those teachers. And that's not the reason for them being there. They are not there to get great SAT results. They're there to get greatness from the children, whatever that looks like. It's the child's potential, not the government's potential for data. Some schools, I think, of the how they're getting very wrong, and ultimately the intent. So I think a lot of schools need to go back to, what is your intent? What do you want for this child? This child who walks in at 4 years old and says, ta-da, I'm here until I'm 11. Well, what are you going to do for me? Are you going to say, we're going to hammer you until you get top SAT results? No, of course you're not. I asked my staff, here's the 4-year-old, write around the picture all the things you want for this child by the time they leave at 11. At their leavers service, what do you want for this child? And not one teacher put SATs, pass at SATs, not one. They all put confidence, happy, loves learning, compassion, kindness. And there must have been like, 50 or 60 words around this child, and not one was academic achievement. And I was so proud, because I just thought, that's exactly the right attitude towards this child. This child will achieve academically if they have all of these things, these characteristics. So, again, SOS, I also have in there how to change to a character curriculum. So you are working on their characteristics, not remembering stuff. But if you help them to become ambitious and self-aware and have self-belief and compassion and kindness and all of those things, children will learn because they'll want to learn, and they will excel because they're self-driven.
Yeah. I wish you were my head teacher.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been something I've my son's in year 1 in primary school, and I obviously want my children to do well, but like you touched on, foremost, I want them to want to go to school. I want them to enjoy. I want them to like their teacher. I want them to like their dinner lady at school. I want them to enjoy mixing with pupils from all different backgrounds. I think if they can get that right, whatever they will achieve is, like you say, their potential, and that's fine. Like that's fine. You are who you are. The biggest fear for me is if my children ever come back from school with the thoughts that I had of school, of not wanting to be there, looking for an excuse or not. That's sad, and that's not what, like, I'm a massive believer in, even as an adult, of once my mindset is, and always has been through my working life, if I'm in a working position and I, for whatever reason, don't enjoy it, or we don't align with where we want to be, or whatever it might be, I'm done. I'm not. I move on. I can't settle for things that I don't enjoy, and I don't think that's a bad characteristic. But it scares me about my children at school if they have that same mindset, that once they find themselves falling out of love of it, that they don't want it, because you know, like you say, school isn't just about grades. It's about so much more than that. So I completely.
We binned subjects, we binned timetables, and then we found the teachers managed to teach far more of the curriculum a lot quicker. We got through the year curriculum in 2/3 of the year instead of a whole year, and the teachers were very surprised by that. They were surprised, but I think let's let teachers be professionals. They know exactly what children need to cover. Let's give them the freedom to put those objectives really subtly and carefully in to these great projects these children want to do. And they can do that. Teachers can do it if you just back away and let them do what they're great at. And if they're struggling, then help them to do that, don't condemn them. Again, another article I'm going to be doing is coaching as opposed to appraisals. Let's move away from the fear factor, and let's coach children to be the best they can be. Let's coach the teachers to be the best they can be. When I coach teachers, and I'm coaching teachers within the co-op, I coach the heads and I coach the teachers. I'm coaching a TA at the moment. And they actually meet probably 20 times more targets through coaching, but they stand tall and they're confident, and they say they love coming to coaching. They really enjoy it. They go away with this surge of energy and confidence, and they just go and nail it. Well, in appraisals, they have 3, 3 targets, and they're hung over them like an axe over their neck, do this or else. And we have to move away from all of that. And no one should be doing achieving anything through fear. We should be achieving it because it's the right thing to do and because we really want to. And what you see is a very different culture and ethos, very different. And then they achieve. Everyone achieves. The staff achieve. The children achieve. And the head has a lot less work to do. And compete in those relationships and barriers, basically.
Yeah, other than the fact that I completely agree and I just completely agree with everything you've said, and I do hope that like I said, there's so much stuff I'm noticing on social media platforms that is screaming about this type of thing. You know, there's lots of people shouting about this. So if ever there's been a time to start making changes and making alterations, this has got to be now. It's got to be, hasn't it? Because the education system, like, we could go off on this for ages again about the kind of lack of support a lot of the time, and kind of not being made aware of things. But if ever there's been a time when, you know, education has been a bit disrupted, like everything else in the world, now is that time to kind of just reassess how things are done, isn't it? And I really hope that it does. And speaking personally, you know, I think when all the stuff came out last night about people suggesting parents speak to Ofsted about what their school, like, I probably shouldn't have even mentioned that, but in a private organisation, that conversation, that statement would have probably been like workplace bullying at the highest order, like in my opinion.
There's the fear right there.
Yeah,
that's the fear. You go to Ofsted if you're not getting what you want, and so now head teachers are trying to deliver 10 times more to appease all parents. Well, I'm sorry, you cannot please everyone all of the time. So stay focused on your customer. What is the experience for the customer, which is the child? The child is coming to you for an education. So what experience they're having? Now, you know, in our schools, we've looked at a multitude of ways of educating. Some children do far better with a recorded lesson, so they can watch it 3 or 4 times. It's not a one-off and time's up, ding, ding, you missed out if you didn't catch all of that tough. So if you record the input and then you say, right, and the input might be 5 minutes. I'm going to show you how to do this. You're going to do it with me. And I want you to have a go. And then I want you to come back to me for part 2. So then they do it. And if they get a bit confused, they can go back and watch part 1 again and say, well, I'm going to watch that one more time. And then they can have another go and go, I think I get that now. I'll try part 2. And part 2 is, well done, you did 2 of the questions. Now we're going to move on and we're going to do this bit. Now, for a child who is disengaged or who has SEN, has SEND, then this is really accessible. You've just taken away all their barriers. If they have slow processing, no problem. They can go back and they can watch it, they can pause it. So there's pressure from government to do live lessons all day long. First, you've got the screen fatigue, but then all those children, you've just put those barriers back in place that you could have gotten rid of. And so again, we come back to focus on the barriers for that child. So all these children can now access the learning, and they're doing far better online learning because they can come and go. They can take lots of breaks. They can go back and watch it again, watch it 5 times if they want to before they have a go, which will build their confidence. They're more likely to get it right, which again will build their confidence. And they're in control. You know, that they're not trying to run at someone else's pace. You know, they say in a race the slowest leads, and in schools it's just not like that. The fastest leads, and if you can't keep up, then you know you're SEN and you have to stay in at lunch and have intervention. And we stopped all interventions. Interventions stopped. We shouldn't be putting children in little rooms saying you need lots of extra help. No, they don't. They need good quality teaching. They need compassion. They need love. They need kindness. They need time. You know, they need resources to support them. They need to be able to return back to things. They don't need to be shunted out into another room. Stop it. Stop doing this. It really frustrates the life out of me. So we have completely stopped that at the QET. We no longer take any child out of class. And they're doing so much better. You know.
On the online learners, I have to say this week from a parent's point of view has been the hardest week since COVID's been around in terms of home learning. I think, yeah, it was challenging. I'm absolutely grateful to our school that they have the every day you log onto the site and get pre-recorded lessons.
Yeah,
I wouldn't, as a family, we wouldn't be able to do online lessons all day. It would not work from a, like, parents have jobs to do as well. You know, we can't just stop jobs completely. So that the pre-recorded ones have worked brilliantly. And also for me, knowing when my son wants to do it, we do it. And if that gets to the point I'm not going to sit and start arguing with him because he doesn't want to learn, because then it's just going to create that I don't like education, and actually I want him to like it. So I think I'm absolute full of praise for our son's school. I think they've done an immense job. And
some people are doing a sort of a blend between the two. So there are some live lessons to encourage that social interaction, that they feel they get that live conversation. And absolutely, so we've also put in, you know, Zoom parties, if you like, where the whole focus is just to chat, where they just log in for half an hour and have a really good old yarn with their teachers. But we've also asked all the staff, every member of staff, to read a book. So to record themselves reading chapters of a book, so that children can dip in and out and hear their teacher's voice reading to them. It's a lovely comforting thing for many children, and that's really key. So there are lots of ways of keeping that interaction and keeping that relationship, which I said before, the relationship is absolutely key. So you've got to keep your relationships going. There are loads of phone calls home, chatting to the children. What have you been doing? Not work-wise, but basically, have you been practicing riding your bike? Are you getting better at it? You know, what's your challenge this week, kind of thing. And just conversation, you know, that you would in the classroom. Actually showing them that you love them, you care about them, and you value them. So it's not about academic success at all. And it's about getting a blend of all of those things, isn't it? It's this, you know, this full time on face-to-face online learning. If you have 5 children, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, we do know someone who's got four boys, and the oldest is in year 7 at secondary school. Yeah, okay, brilliant. I think everything you said I completely agree with, and could carry on talking about all that sort of stuff quite a lot. I think if anyone kind of listening is interested in the work that Julie's doing, I'll add links in the show notes. Julie, I think I'm gonna say it again. I think your story is inspirational. I think you should take absolute credit for that and give yourself a good pat on the back, because I think what you've been through, what you've done, is amazing. I'm really look forward to speaking to you again. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story and sharing what you do. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Julie.